Thank you for joining us tonight for the presentation, The GapTracks Project, Wildlife on the Eastern Trail. I'm Catherine Morrison, and I'm the Assistant Director and Adult Services Manager here at the library. And I'm joined by Lucy Norval, who is our Coordinator of Programming and Communications. She's helping me run things behind the scenes here. We're very thankful to the Friends of Scarborough Marsh for proposing and co-sponsoring tonight's event. Before I introduce our speaker, we are going to hear a reading of the library's land acknowledgement.
The Scarborough Public Library acknowledges that it is located in the traditional homeland, past and present, of tribes in the Wabanaki Confederacy. We recognize and honor the current tribes who comprise the Confederacy: the Penobscot, the Passamaquoddy, the Maliseets, and the Micmac, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We acknowledge the Owaskoag people who once lived in what is now Scarborough. We respect the traditional values of these tribes and support their efforts for land and water protection and restoration. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences.
Thank you. Our presenter tonight is Dr. Noah Perlut, Professor and Assistant Academic Director of the School of Marine and Environmental Programs at the University of New England in Biddeford. He, along with his students from the Terrestrial Wildlife class, will present an overview of the GapTracks Project, a program that assesses the wildlife community in the gap of the Eastern Trail and Nonesuch River, an area relevant to the Scarborough Marsh, before, during, and after trail construction. I'm going to turn it over to you, Noah, and your class.
Great, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Let me get this screen share going. All right, so thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the library and the Friends of Scarborough Marsh collaborating to realize this project. One that's absolutely near and dear to my heart for a lot of reasons. And tonight, I think that this is the true spirit of the project, where so many worlds are being brought together: the community and conservation groups in the library, and the university and students coming together to celebrate the wildlife that live in our backyard. And I really hope at the end of this talk tonight that you'll have a good feeling of things that we're seeing out there, because it truly is special, the place that we live and the resources that are all around us. They live quite a hidden life sometimes, but we have cameras and ways to watch them. So this is called the GapTracks Project. And the GapTracks Project is named after a project that is happening in Scarborough called the Gap Project, which is the gap of the Eastern Trail. And this is a project that will essentially build a little over 1 mile of trail and link the Eastern Trail as it currently exists going through Scarborough and up Eastern Road to Wainwright Field. And here, this slide shows you the map of what will be built, hopefully in the very near future. And the black line that you see is the sort of effectively the proposed route that will be built. And I have been interested in how this trail affects wildlife for a long time. Affects meanings provides habitat for them, provides an avenue to move around for them. And so this project started really based on a question of that. I spent a lot of time on the trail, moving in around it, seeing animals. And I wanted to know, well, this is an unimpacted forest as far as the trail doesn't exist there. And I wanted to know what wildlife uses this trail currently, the area that the trail will be built. And then how will that change, if it changes at all, during construction? And then once the trail is actually done being built after about 1.5 years of construction. And so I reached out to the Friends of Scarborough Marsh and they were very enthusiastic about the project and agreed to help fund the hardware for the project. And we've been working on this since February of 2017, where in February of 2017, I established a grid of remote game cameras. And you can see this map of them here, where there are originally 8 cameras. The 2 on the bottom part of your screen are cameras that are on the trail that currently exists. And then the 6 cameras at the top of the screen are in the forest and wetland of where the trail will be built. For the purposes of today's talk, we are really only going to be focusing on the 6 cameras in the area of where the trail will be built. So what is this? What's actually happening here? We have an array of these cameras, and you can see this is an image of the first camera in the area that we're working on here. The camera's on the left attached to an old utility pole. And those cameras work 24 hours a day all year, in that when any sorts of wildlife passes in front of the camera, it immediately takes 2 pictures and then a 10-second video. And the video has audio components. And so that allows us to assess wildlife that we might not be able to see, but we can hear, things like birds and frogs, which is a really exciting tool. So we keep these cameras out all along, and we visit them every few months and download literally hundreds of thousands of pictures and videos. And this unbelievable army of students spends a lot of time, frankly, sifting through videos of wind blowing leaves around, looking for these pictures and sounds of wildlife. And today you're going to see the fruits of this fantastic labor, where we have gone through a huge catalog of data from the last 4 years. And this data represents what this area looks like before construction. 2 years from now, I hope to be here again, giving a talk with another group of students, where hopefully at that point, we're able to compare the data from before construction with the data at least during construction. And then eventually with what this place looks like once the trail is completely built out and ready to go. So with that, we're going to start going through data. And just to let you know how this works, I have 12 amazing students from my terrestrial wildlife class here, and they have each led a particular component of the data analysis, where they had a question that interests them. And so they organized and analyzed the data and found relevant pictures and videos to share with you that accompany that. And we're going to come through as a group and one at a time share that component. All right. So thank you for your patience as we sort of move through this, and I hope you enjoy it, and I look forward to hearing your questions and discussion at the end.
Hello. So I will be starting with the species abundance that we're seeing on the cameras. So this is not only the number of species that we're seeing, but also how often. So as you can see in this, gray squirrel and white-tailed deer were by far the most commonly seen on our cameras, followed by wild turkey. This is specifically just the bird species that were found. So the most commonly seen on the cameras was wild turkey, followed by, I believe that's crow behind the picture of me. Yeah, if I can move it. Yeah, American crow. So here we have a video of a red-tailed hawk interacting with a gray squirrel. This next chart just has to do with the mammal species abundance that we're seeing on the cameras. So again, just like the first chart, the most commonly seen were gray squirrel and white-tailed deer. And we have 2 more videos here. The one on the left is of a doe and a fawn. And on the right, we have a video of a bobcat coming towards the camera.
So next week, I compiled all the data and looked at the top 6 most abundant species. And by far, compiling all the different bird species together, the most abundant was the birds. And then following that was gray squirrel and white-tailed deer, as Cam stated before, and the others as well. And then here we got to capture a really cool video of a gray fox playing with a mouse. And it's not very often that you get to see these kind of animals interact in this way, where he clearly could have taken the mouse and eaten it for dinner, but instead he chose to follow him around and kind of play with him. So next I looked at which seasons these animals were the most common in and which they were seen most in front of the cameras. So as you can see, the gray squirrel was most likely seen in the winter in front of our cameras, and then the birds were seen in the spring, which makes sense when you think about it. And as well as the white-tailed deer, they were seen most in their breeding season, which is in the fall, versus raccoons and gray fox and mice, which were seen pretty consistently in front of the cameras throughout all the seasons. And as you can see, we had a couple pictures on the side here.
So next up, I made a chart of the most appearances made by gray fox, red fox, fishers, weasels, both long-tail and short-tail weasels, and bobcats during the year. Gray foxes were the species cited the most. They were most cited in spring and fall. The most we saw of red foxes were in November and December. And you can see when the red fox sightings go up, the gray fox sightings go down. We saw most of the bobcats in winter and fall, and a little bit in the spring. We saw all of the weasels in the spring and most of the fishers in the fall. Here's a video of a gray fox scent marking. This is a red fox moving through the area. This is a video of a fisher climbing a tree, as well as a video of a fisher coming up to inspect the game trail camera. Long-tail weasel moving on the same tree that the fisher was climbing in the last video. And last is a picture of a bobcat.
So for my side, I decided to study the abundance of the predatory animals that we saw and their diets that went along with it. And like the slide before, this consists of the bobcat, fisher, gray fox, red fox, and short and long-tailed weasels. As you can see, the most abundant predatory animal were the gray fox, and the least abundant were the combination of short and long-tailed weasels. And underneath, I have pie charts that consist of their percentage of which diet is plant and meat. And as you can see, the animals that have a combination of diets for both meat and plants were more abundant than those who ate solely just the meat, like the bobcat and the short-tailed and long-tailed weasels. And this is a picture of a coyote eating. So I was looking at seasonality differences between gray foxes and red foxes, and they're like how they're distributed throughout the year. As with the gray foxes being in blue and red foxes being in red, you can see that you can generally see gray foxes throughout the year, but red foxes are not around in the summer months. So mostly they're around in the January and December.
Here's another graph kind of showing a similar thing, but just breaking down the individual seasons. You can see the gray foxes are much more abundant kind of throughout the year, but red foxes again, like mainly in winter and kind of late autumn. I believe that one summer observation was like or like kind of like mid-September. So it's kind of like right on the edge there. There's a couple videos. First one is a red fox walking through the snow. And this next one is a gray fox walking through the shrubbery and vegetation.
All right, so this slide shows a picture of an aerial view of where all the cameras are located and where they are in relation to each other. All right, so here's a closer look at where each cameras are. Camera 3 is located close to where the bridge across the Nonesuch River is. Camera 4 is close to the shrubbery marsh habitat. Cameras 5 through 7 are in a similar habitat in a mature forest, and camera 8 is in a location close in proximity to a warehouse and train tracks. All right, and this graph shows the total number of species by camera. As you can see, camera 4 has the highest number of species species seen, and camera 6 saw the least amount of species. It's important to remember that camera 8 is in an area that is most developed by humans as well as near train tracks. And this graph, you can see the number of mammal species by camera, with camera 8 having the most mammals seen and camera 5 having the least. However, even though camera 8 is by the train tracks, and we see a lot more mammal species here.
I looked at which cameras were seeing the most human versus wildlife activity. And so we see that at camera 8, there's the most like human activity observed there. And then on camera 4, we have a lot more wildlife using that camera. And we have a little video of a raccoon. And then this is just some examples of people using the area that we saw on our cameras. Some hiking. Yeah, some people hunting in the area as well.
All right, now what I took a look at here is how long after humans were recorded on camera it took for wildlife to return to the camera area. So this pie chart here represents the consolidated data from all 6 cameras. So as you can see, it was most common for wildlife to return to an area over 2 days after humans had been spotted on camera. And it was least common for them to return 1 to 2 hours after human activity. And I took it a step further and broke it down by camera. So we're going to take a look here at camera 4 and camera 8. Like Julia mentioned a couple slides ago, camera 4 had the least amount of human activity recorded on camera, whereas camera 8 had the most. And like Megan mentioned a few slides ago as well, camera 8 is the most developed area of all the cameras.
So if you look over here on the right at camera 8, it is interesting to see that these, the wildlife on this camera were more willing to return to an area sooner, later than the wildlife over here on camera 4. So camera 4 is less used to human activity, yet they were more willing to return to the area just 0 to 59 minutes after human activity was recorded. Whereas on camera 8, they were more likely to maybe take their time a little bit, which is interesting. And then here on this next slide, I took it a step further and broke it down to which species tended to be the first to return to an area after human presence happened. So as you can see, it was most common for gray squirrels to return to an area first, which makes sense when you consider how Cam mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, how gray squirrels were the most abundant wildlife species that we saw on camera overall.
So in this graph, we wanted to talk about the percent of observations for different species during different time frames. So we separated it from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then as we can see, the most abundant was the all birds category, turkeys, squirrels. They were the most active during the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. timeframe. And the foxes, raccoons, and white-tailed deer were the most active during the 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. timeframe. And then here are some photos that were photos of species that were mentioned in the graph before. So we have a wild turkey, a jumping gray squirrel, a flying red-tailed hawk, a white-tailed deer, and a raccoon.
So I focused on scavengers, particularly like how common the scavengers we saw were. So opossums, skunks, and raccoons. And this first graph is the number of observations seen over the 12 months for the 6 cameras. As you can see, there is a pretty consistent amount of observations for raccoons. In regards to skunks and opossums, there was less activity or observations seen amongst them. They were a little spread out, but like again, raccoons were pretty consistently seen throughout all the 12 months. And for this graph, it kind of tells a different story. It's about the percent of total observations seen between these 3 species. And as you can see, for the month of May, there was actually a huge increase of percentage of opossums observed. We don't necessarily know why. It can be kind of assumed that it's a little bit after their breeding season, so their pups might be in the area of that area that they're looking for, but they're definitely there for a reason. And just have some videos to play. So this one is of a skunk just traveling around. This is on camera 8. And then in this video, it's a little baby opossum. It's kind of hard to see, but he's a little guy. And then in this video, we actually have a tailless raccoon, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, we just have a video of some raccoons playing with each other.
All right, here we go. So hello, everybody. So what I wanted to touch upon is I want to touch upon gray fox observed at day and night through 6 months of the year, broken up by equinox. So as you can see, this vertical line in the graph, this slight vertical line. So everything to the left is from the spring equinox to the fall equinox. And then on the right side, it's the fall to the spring equinox. So as you can see here, that gray foxes are almost always active at night. Most of the time, the night is in the red, so it depends. So it's both active on the night for the darker times of the year and the lighter times of the year, like warmer and colder months of the year. And here we have a gray fox running around. Okay, so now I focus on white-tailed deer as well. So the vertical line, everything to the left is from the March equinox to the fall equinox, spring to the fall equinox, and then fall to the spring equinox. So as you can see, during the warmer months of the year, that that deer and the deer occurs at pretty much the same, a little bit different, more active in the night, but pretty much the same at the daytime versus night. However, when you go to the colder months when it's dark more often, you can see that deer are more active at night, as you can see from the January and February months, as well as the March month. They're way more active. Here's a nice little video of the deer. So deer in the day, deer's in the day, and deer in the night right here. Lastly, I want to touch upon coyotes as well. So kind of like the same methods, daytime and night between the two equinoxes. As you can see, from July and August, they are active all the time in those months. However, when you go to the colder months like January, February, March, you can see that they're way more active during the night, as well as September as well during those times, which I thought was kind of interesting. Here we have a coyote here, and zipping through.
So I chose to look at game animals because hunting is such an important part of Maine's culture. And even around this area, there's a whole bunch of deer stands, and we've seen hunters on the cameras. So this graph just shows the 3-year average of just the straight abundance of white-tailed deer numbers. So you can see in the middle of the winter, it starts off, there's almost no deer. This area isn't really generally a good winter habitat for them for whatever reason. And then they spike up in April, May. That's when they're just coming out to feed and get back to their weight after the winter. And then it kind of stays stable with a little bump around the breeding season in November to December. And then this is just the abundance within the hunting season. So obviously extended bow has the most amount of deer through September through December. And then the bow hunt has a little bit less. The firearm has a lot because that's around that time of the breeding season, that bump. And then muzzleloader has the lowest amount from November to the end of December. It's also the shortest season. So numbers kind of make sense. And there's a nice video of a deer saying hello to the camera. And then I also did turkey. That's the other game animal that's common around here. And as you can see, same thing in the middle of the winter. This isn't good habitat for them. They're not really present here. And they spike around April, May. They go down a bit, and then they have another bump around August, September. And how that relates to the breeding season or the hunting seasons. Oh, wait, never mind. There's a whole bunch of turkeys. And how that relates to the hunting season is during the fall, there's not as many turkeys as during the spring hunting season. And the hunting season is obviously September 20th, November 6th, and then May 2nd to June 4th. So you're going to have a lot more block hunting turkey in the spring, which is kind of unfortunate because that's not around Thanksgiving time.
Kind of following along my colleague Tom's slide, continuing on the birds. So we also wanted to look at the total observations of birds. Wild turkey not included this time. So as you can see, southern Maine experiences an influx during migration. So the months of April and May. So what we have here, I don't know if you guys can hear this, but this little clip right here, you can hear a common yellowthroat, which is a migratory warbler, a yellow warbler, and an American robin. They're all calling in the background here. And we experienced Hope you guys kind of heard a few bird chirps there. So those are the 3 birds that I mentioned, if you heard a couple of those. And here as well, we actually got a sight of an American woodcock, which is a timberdoodle, does a little sky dance in the air, which I thought was kind of interesting. And there he is, just moving low to the ground. And another quick thing I wanted to add, that most of the common birds that we've experienced that we saw in this data set are black-capped chickadees, blue jay, American crow, American goldfinch, northern cardinal, and song sparrow, and a variety of others. But those handful of birds that I just mentioned are the most common that we see and hear in the game cameras.
All right. So that is all the data that we wanted to present today. I did want to end with 2 components. First is that this project has a really big educational component to it, and that we try to share our videos and pictures and information that we gain through social media. And we have established 2 methods of doing that. One is by watching American woodcock. So we have a really active Facebook page and post videos and pictures on here every couple of days. This page has been active since the project started in 2017. I really encourage you, if you use Facebook, to go in and like the page and check out the videos. There's all kinds of great stuff on there. And then more recently, we've also started a Instagram page. This one doesn't yet have a whole lot of content onto it, but it's now linked, and we'll be getting all the new content that comes out will be linked on there. So if you use Instagram, I encourage you to follow that. And then finally, before questions, we have a lot of partners in this project. I really, again, want to end by thanking the Friends of Scarborough Marsh, who have been so thoughtful and supportive of this project from day one. Mainland Fisheries and Wildlife, the town of Scarborough, the Eastern Trail Alliance, the many private landowners around there that let us on their land, the University of New England, who really supports us during the academic year. And then finally, although I sort of organized this project is the heart and soul of our students. And so these guys put so much time and effort into looking through the videos and pictures and thinking about these wildlife. It's really incredible. So with that, thank you all very much for listening, and we'd be happy to open up this talk. I will stop sharing, and we can open up the talk to any questions that you may have. I'm going to tilt this around so you can see everybody.
Well, Noah, this is Catherine. Before I get to the questions from the audience, was there anything that surprised you that you saw, or was it mainly things that you were expecting to see?
There's surprises constantly, absolutely. I think maybe the first and sort of most exciting surprise was about a year ago, there was a moose that showed up on a school day at the Scarborough High School on track, and it walked past the middle school. And it was, moose are in Scarborough, but not that commonly. About 2 days later, that same moose showed up in Willard Beach in South Portland. But it used the GapTracks habitat as a corridor to get from Scarborough to Willard Beach. And to me, that is really emblematic of the value of this property, that the wildlife are really using it to move through big charismatic animals. Some live there year round, but not always. At this point, the only large mammal that we have not yet seen on our cameras is bears, but we have seen evidence of them around, and people have seen them nearby. So I expect to see them soon. So that's been a really exciting thing that we've learned. The second would be, I think, we talked a lot about tonight, gray fox and red fox. And I was really surprised to see the distribution of how many gray fox we have compared to red fox. We're just seeing gray fox way more. And I would have thought maybe the opposite. Gray fox are relatively new to Maine. They are kind of more of a southern species, and and came to Maine around the southern Maine around the 1940s-ish, plus or minus 10 years. And to see how they've really overtaken red fox, at least in this part of Scarborough, is pretty fascinating.
Thanks. I think that moose went through the library grounds as well when it was at the school. We have some questions from Mary. How did you determine the diet of the animals, or were you able to? And where do the red fox go in the summer? She's asking.
Do you want to take on the diet? How you assess the diet?
So for the diet, I think that was just basically Googling on some of like official government websites to see what they ate. And for the animals that had a combination, it was the plant part of the diet was a lot heavily relied on different types of berries. But I know the gray fox also had a big chunk of different types of nuts that they would eat. But for the most part, for the combination, it was just different types of berries or nuts that they would chew on.
Sorry, can you say the second part of the question again?
She's asking, where did the red fox go in the summer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have no idea. I'm very, very curious. Any of you all have any hypotheses of where they might be going? Yeah, we don't know. That might be a radio tracking type study where we have to follow them around and find out where they go.
Someone's asking about the time frame between sighting of human and animals. They'd heard that it was animals tolerating humans as primary determinant of shorter duration. Was this also in some cases just more animal activity in an area? And that's the primary reason they're there sooner.
So there definitely were a couple cameras that didn't have a lot of instances of human activity to begin with, so that did kind of throw off our data in a sense. But that's why I focused specifically on cameras 4 and 8, because I felt like they provided the most valuable information without having a severely limiting amount of data to look at. So there were some cameras, but not specifically cameras 4 and 8 that we looked at.
And we should add that even though we've talked about differences amongst cameras, these cameras are incredibly close together, relatively speaking. Not a student. Sorry. It would take about 30 seconds for a fox or a coyote or a bobcat to run across all 6 of the cameras. They're that close together. I don't know exactly how, maybe a third of a mile. Certainly no more than half a mile. And so while we're talking about differences amongst them, I'd be a little careful to make too many assumptions because they're all interacting together.
Could you repeat the answer about the diet? I think some people had a hard time hearing that first answer about the.
Yeah, absolutely. So the diet was found, the information on the diet was found through a literature search, an online literature search, not from actual physical data collected here in Scarborough. And so that's really, those represent their diets kind of across their whole distribution. And the species that had more plant matter in them, things like fox and coyote, the details of that are quite interesting in that they have a lot of berries in their diet, particularly in the fall. I know coyote eat a huge amount of blackberry, and then also some of the fox will be eating some tree masts, some nuts that come from trees. They'll eat those in the fall as well, particularly gray fox.
You might have addressed this a bit, but it says, with regard to the camera placements, was any consideration given to placing where animals' trails / territories were? And if not, how would the random appearance of mammals versus more frequent appearances in territories skew your data and its meaning?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The places that the cameras were put were designed to, in a couple of ways. One, we wanted to follow the relative path of where the trail will be built as approximately as we could. Two, we wanted to have them in places that had a reasonable amount of visibility, where there weren't landscape features like a hill that would block our ability to see anything. Three, we wanted to have places that we thought that wildlife would come through, so near waterways or kind of passage areas. And then related to that, the actual forest corridor that a lot of the cameras are in is remarkably narrow. It's a really mature forest. When you walk through it, it feels like you're going through a parkland. It's so open and it's beautiful. But it's only probably 150 or 200 meters wide at the most. And so it's a fairly narrow band that the cameras are running on in a line. And so we didn't really think about a particular territory of an animal, because also we weren't aiming to catch images or videos of one or a small suite of species. We wanted to get everything that comes through there as much as possible. And by sort of spreading out the cameras, we're hoping we can catch everything at least once as it moves through the area and the different habitat types in that area.
And we have someone new to town who's asking if you could explain again exactly where this gap is in the trail.
Absolutely. So if you're on the Eastern Road off of Black Point Road and you go north on Eastern Road, it ends at a small parking lot, and the Eastern Trail continues from that parking lot going north. It winds for about 3/4 of a mile or a mile, and it ends at an old train abutment of the Eastern Trail across the Nonesuch River. And that's where the trail currently ends, and where the new section of the trail will begin when they add in a modular bridge to cross that abutment.
Okay, thanks. Someone's asking, just curious if cameras 1 and 2 show much less wildlife compared to the cameras located on the unbuilt section of the trail.
No, they show quite a bit of wildlife, but the wildlife there was way more restricted to only nighttime activity. That part of the trail gets a lot of runners, walkers, many dogs there as well, both on leash and off leash, probably more so off leash. And so that has, I think, impacts on when the animals will be out there. So we tended to find a lot more animals out there at night, particularly mammals, for sure. There wasn't as much of an impact on birds, but definitely a difference in when they'll use the trail. That being said, there are quiet periods on the trail, bad weather, cold, and the animals did seem a little bit more likely to come out during the daytime during those periods of bad weather.
Okay, let's see. Someone's asking if there are any, interested to know if the planned trail route has any animal trails that intersect it.
Yeah, there's not really any kind of single game trail that runs through there. You can see there's lots of ways the animals kind of move through there. There's not like a single deer path that all the deer follow as they move through there. And so the trail, yes, is going to be crossing all of the wildlife habitat that you saw videos of today at different points. But there's not a single pinch point that we've noticed where animals tend to cross more than others.
Someone's asking if you think this is a good representation of what will be present in the whole length of the proposed trail, what you're seeing in this smaller area.
Wow.
Where the cameras are.
Going from South Portland to the Berwicks, huh? Whew. That's a curveball, I guess. Wow, what do you guys think?
So I imagine further north you get, probably the more wildlife you see and the less activity.
Yeah, so let me repeat that just in case you had a hard time hearing. Tom was suggesting that it really depends on human density, right? And that the places that trails are being used a lot might impact what animals are there, what species are there. And the trail also, we talked about a lot of daytime, but there's lots of parts of the trail that are used at night too. People on skis at night or biking or walking at night too. So there are humans that are using the trail kind of at night too. The thing that's really fantastic is, we found, what was it, 22 mammal species?
Yeah, 22 mammal species.
22 mammal species, which is pretty close to the whole mammal community that we'd be able to see here. We're missing bear, and we haven't seen mink, but those are also the animals that are in Berwick. Like all of the animals that we're seeing here, we would also expect to see in Berwick. And so I think it probably is quite representative of what the trail wildlife community would be like in the southern part of the state, the further south you go.
Someone's asking how many years the data covers. Was it back to 2017?
Yes, yes. So this talk went back through, the data started in February of 2017, and we clipped it off in the beginning of February of 2022.
Did you notice any differences in that amount of time? And
we have not analyzed data across years, so I can't really answer that question. I think it's tough to tell.
Someone's asking about the time frame of when the bridge is being put in. Do you know when that's going to happen?
That is not my job.
Okay.
So I'm going to punt big time.
And maybe someone, maybe someone from the Friends of the Scarborough Marsh knows more about when the bridge is going to be put in.
So John Kaczmar just jumped in here. John, Executive Director of the Eastern Trail Alliance, and he is absolutely way more in a much better position to talk about that than I am.
Oh, it says fall of 2022. Thanks, John. Someone's wondering about cottontail rabbits. You didn't mention those, I don't think.
So did you guys see any rabbits? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so this section of the habitat that our cameras are in are not really appropriate for New England cottontail. New England cottontail like incredibly dense and thick shrublands. Like you would look at it and be like, I am never walking through there. It's horrible. So we have not seen any images of them. If we were going to see rabbits, it would be snowshoe hare probably, or the newly arriving eastern cottontail. But we have not seen New England cottontail nor suspected any.
Someone else was asking about red squirrels.
One? I think we've had only one observation of red squirrels.
Wow.
We've had mostly gray squirrels, but we've had flying squirrels as well. 2 red squirrels. So we've had 2 red squirrels. We've had flying squirrels. There are 2 species of flying squirrels here, and from the way that our pictures were oriented, we couldn't tell if they were northern or southern flying squirrels. And then we've also seen groundhogs. So that's the other kind of squirrel-related species of, and chipmunks as well.
Well, if anyone has any final questions, we do have a note from John Kaczmar that he's very grateful to you and your students for the work that you're doing, analyzing the trail. And I'm sure the Friends of Scarborough Marsh are also very grateful to you.
Well, thank you very much for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to share what we're learning.
And so we can check out that Facebook page, just facebook.com/GapTracks. Is that?
Yeah, if you just put in GapTracks, and GapTracks is one word. if you just search GapTracks, Facebook or whatever, it'll come up. There's nothing like it out there.
Okay. Well, we thank you so much for sharing your hard work with us, and will your students continue to work on this, or?
And some say yes,
All
some say
done?
no.
Yeah.
Some of these guys are graduating, and so they're off to greener pastures. Others, I'm going to rope back in whether they like it or not.
Okay.
They've been wonderful. I'm super proud of them.
Well, we have many thank yous coming in to you and your students. So thank you for a wonderful presentation, sharing all the data, and hope everyone gets out on the trail in person and tries to take a look at some of this wildlife.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And we do want to point out that this will be recorded, or has been recorded. So if you want to watch it again, or if you missed any of it, we'll have it up on our website probably in about a week. So check it out again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.